All right, cool. So here we're going to talk about lease signings a little bit, because that's the most important part of any kind of rental operation, because this is how you get your money. So why have a rental house if you can't get your money? So we're sitting here with one of my buddies and his lease agreement, so I might be asking him some questions as we go through this, and we're going to talk about from beginning to end. First, how do you get a good lease? Second, how do you make sure that you get that lease to the tenant in delivery? And then third, how we follow up on some of the things from the lease. So we're sitting here, we're in the state of Florida with the residential lease agreement. I'm assuming that this came off some kind of standard Florida law website or from a lawyer.
Another big group.
Big group. All right, cool. So this is the investment group that we're members of. So they give out this lease agreement. I always like to go ahead and go through, make any changes to the pro forma lease agreement that I received, and then have those go through document review from a lawyer that's barred in the state that I'm doing it in. So here we got a standard pro forma lease agreement, but the landlords have gone through and typed in all the tenants' information and all the terms of the lease agreement. I like that. It makes it a lot cleaner. There's no kind of confusion as to, is that a number or letter or anything like that. It makes it look super professional. Another thing that is really good here is that we have all of the dollar amounts. We have the dollar amounts down here. Another thing in other leases that I've seen is to spell out and then to go ahead and put the numbers of the dollar amounts, just to make sure that there's no discrepancies if somebody tries to edit that lease in the future. One thing that I don't see here is the first month's rent being prorated.
Yeah, that was something that we were talking about a while ago, that we were just saying, because he gave us a lump sum check for the pet deposit and the first month and the regular deposit, and I noticed it afterwards, and I was like, well, we'll just tell him, hey, off the next month we just prorate it, because we discussed prorating beforehand. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a little issue, but I figured after the first month it'd be caught up.
Yeah, so there's two different ways to do it. One, you can prorate the first month, take the prorated rent up front along with the deposit amounts, or you can prorate the first month and take the first full month rent up front, and then the next month charge them the prorated rent.
That's kind of what we were thinking about doing.
Yeah, I personally charge the prorated rent and collect that along with the deposits up front, just because it's easier for me. But that is an option, to collect the first month's rent up front and then in the future charge them a prorated rent amount. So that's pretty much going through the lease and actually setting up the lease, so you have your documentation all ready for the tenant. Next is the actual leasing, and this is a part that I really want to hit on. So when you do the leasing, like you're sitting here, you got your lease, your tenant's sitting across the table from you. This is your first opportunity to establish a first impression of your professionalism as a landlord with that tenant. So I take the leasing very seriously. I like to walk through that lease and go through, at least summarize every single paragraph in that lease, and then I have the tenant initial next to it that they understand. I don't think that's necessarily for needing to have their initials, as much as it establishes that credibility with the tenant that I've taken the time to make this lease. This is the binding agreement between you and I take it seriously enough to make sure that you understand all the terms. So it doesn't just show how seriously you take the lease, but it also shows how seriously you take the relationship with that tenant, because they know, hey, like, these guys are here for me. They want to make sure that I'm taken care of and I'm set up for success. Coming through here with the security deposit and your terms, what you got here for chapter 4, but it also has like cost incurred, things like that. I specifically have a clause in my Missouri leases that I strongly suggest that the tenants get rental insurance. In some states you can enforce the tenants to get rental insurance. At a minimum, I don't know what Florida's rules are on that, but I would at a minimum strongly suggest they get renter's insurance, and then also go over the importance of renter's insurance with every one of your tenants. So this guy, maybe give him a call back and just let him know, he can get renter's insurance super cheap. I've had tenants that are displaced by disasters before, and it's a little too late for them at that point. If they'd been paying the $15 a month, they could have stayed in a hotel until they find another place, rather than having to do stuff at the last minute. It'll also take care of all their personal belongings, helping them replace that, in addition to finding them a place to live. And then lastly, a lot of times renter's insurance will pay for certain tenant incurred damages before going to your insurance. So it does protect you as well by making sure that all your tenants have renter's insurance. I like how here in your lease, one of the things that's also really good is all the pro forma portions are bolded, so you can see what parts of the lease have been edited for that tenant. Not only does that help you with the leasing, but also in the future, going back through those leases as you go to amend them, you can just look for your bolded items and change those as appropriate for each tenant. And then back here on the back side, making sure that you have each tenant sign in the appropriate spot. I'd make sure that you see each one of those tenants in person and you witness the signings if at all possible. And then if you can't do that, if you can't witness the signings in person, I would definitely collect at least IDs on the backside and make sure that those signings were witnessed by somebody, unless you're using some kind of authenticated digital signature, which I have utilized. And then I do always ask for an ID when I do the signing, just to make sure that that person is who they're representing themselves to be. So that's a little bit about setting up your lease. That's a little bit about going through your lease, and then the lease on the backside. The more rental properties you have, the more difficult it becomes to keep that tenant flow going. So I definitely keep a document where you're seeing your upcoming lease ends. So that way, as you get closer to those ends of your leases, you're able to make sure you start engaging those tenants. 6 months, I've heard before. I try to engage my tenants like 60 days out from the ends of their leases, because I want to make sure that I know what their intentions are, and also get a little debrief from them, what they've enjoyed, what they haven't enjoyed about staying in my properties, so that way I can make that experience better. And then also you can start prepping the tenants for any kind of cost of living adjustments that you have, because your lease price is probably going to be going up, and you want to let them know sooner rather than later about that stuff. Cool. Do you have any questions about leasing or things like that I could answer?
No, my biggest things were just like actually doing the process. Like on this guy, I really didn't feel like it was a big deal to do a big background check, because I saw his credentials from Baptist Hospital and I knew they drug tested and
Mainly
background
whenever
checked.
his social media, which was pretty soft. But you can tell by somebody's social media.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and he seemed like a pretty chill guy, but like I know that can be faked, but I mean, I did see his badges from the hospital, and being that my girlfriend works there too, I know they have a really strict policy on just about everything. And he was an electrician, and it was an older house, and it would have been better for us to have somebody in there that was handy for it being an older house that had just been renovated than somebody that had no idea and they'd be calling us every 2 minutes. So that was just our reason why we really wanted to get this guy in there, even if there was a couple extra headaches. And we were a little, really wondered how to do the pet deposit, but we just kind of winged that too with the $200 up front, and instead of like an elevated rent. But it's really like what was our biggest things on the whole deal.
Yeah, and pet deposits can be refundable or non-refundable in some states. So in Missouri, I can do non-refundable pet deposits, so that's what I do there. But it's worth checking into. So cool, good talk. Leases, make sure that you use a standardized lease for the state that you're in. Make sure that it's clear. Make sure you show your tenant how important it is, and then make sure you follow up whenever those leases are ending.
All right.
Sweet.
Awesome, man.